Chopper stood in the dimly lit warehouse, his breath visible in the cold air as sweat trickled down his temple. The room smelled faintly of mildew and desperation, a fitting backdrop for what was about to unfold. In front of him loomed Vito, the Razor Marino, leader of the Black Hand gang, flanked by two hulking enforcers who looked like they'd been carved out of granite. Chop's hands trembled slightly at his sides, but he clenched them into fists to steady himself. "You've got 24 hours, Vito said, his voice low and menacing. "If those 50 kilos aren't back where they belong by then, I'm coming after you. And trust me, it won't be pretty." "But I didn't take them," Chop protested, his voice cracking under the weight of fear. He knew how futile denial was. The gang had already decided he was guilty. After all, he was the one responsible for overseeing the warehouse inventory. And now, with $2 million worth of cocaine gone without a trace, fingers pointed straight at him, Vito leaned closer, his face inches from Chop's. "I don't care if you took them or not. You're the guy holding the bag right now. So either find my product, or start digging your own grave." With that, Vito turned on his heel and walked away, leaving Chop alone in the cavernous space. His heart pounded so hard, he thought it might burst through his chest. This wasn't just bad luck. It was an existential crisis. Chop had always been a small-time player, content to stay in the shadows while others pulled the strings. But tonight, fate had shoved him onto center stage, and the spotlight felt more like a noose tightening around his neck. Chop's first move was to retrace every step leading up to the disappearance. He spent hours combing through security footage, watching grainy black and white images loop endlessly on the monitor. There were no signs of forced entry, no masked figures sneaking in during the night. Whoever had taken the drugs had done so cleanly, professionally. It gnawed at him. How could someone pull this off without leaving a single clue? He called in favors from contacts across the city, desperate for any scrap of information. Word on the street suggested whispers of a rival gang making moves, but nothing concrete. Every lead fizzled out before it went anywhere meaningful. Time ticked away mercilessly, each passing hour bringing him closer to Vito's deadline. As the clock struck midnight, Chop found himself sitting in his car outside a seedy dive bar on the outskirts of town. Inside, he hoped to meet a snitch named Eddie, a wiry little man with a reputation for knowing things he shouldn't. Eddie slid into the passenger seat, clutching a brown paper bag filled with greasy fries. "What do you want?" Eddie asked between bites, his eyes darting nervously. "I need answers," Chop replied. 50 kilos disappeared from the warehouse last week. "Any idea who's behind it?" Eddie hesitated, chewing slowly as though buying time. Finally he spoke. "There's talk about some new players in town, not part of any established crew. They call themselves the Ghosts. Supposedly, they specialize in stealing high-value shipments and selling them off piecemeal." "Where can I find them?" Chop demanded. Eddie shrugged. "Nobody knows for sure. They operate like phantoms. But there's a place, a warehouse down by the docks. Rumor has it they use it as a drop-off point." Chop nodded grimly. If this was his only lead, he'd have to follow it, even if it meant walking into danger blindfolded. The docks were eerily quiet when Chop arrived, the moonlight casting long shadows over rusted shipping containers. He crept toward the designated warehouse, gun drawn but tucked discreetly beneath his jacket. As he approached, he heard muffled voices inside. Peering through a crack in the door, he saw 3 men unloading crates stacked high with white powder. One of them held a clipboard, ticking off items methodically. This was it, the missing cocaine. Adrenaline surged through Chop's veins. He could call Vito, tell him where to find the stash and clear his name. But something stopped him. For years, he'd lived in fear of people like Vito, bowing to their whims and scraping by on scraps. Now, here was an opportunity to change everything, to seize control instead of being controlled. Taking a deep breath, Chop stepped inside. The men froze, startled by his sudden appearance. Before they could react, he raised his gun and fired a warning shot into the ceiling. Dust rained down as the trio scrambled for cover. "Listen up," Chop barked, his voice steadier than he expected. "I'm taking these crates. Anyone tries to stop me, and you'll regret it." To his surprise, they complied. Perhaps they recognized the desperation in his eyes. Or maybe they simply didn't care enough to fight back. Either way, within minutes, Chop had commandeered a truck parked nearby and loaded it with the stolen goods. As he sped away, his mind raced with possibilities. Back at his hideout, Chop began formulating a plan. He couldn't return the drugs to Vito, not yet. Instead, he reached out to old associates, offering them exclusive deals on premium product at cutthroat prices. Word spread quickly, and soon buyers were lining up, eager to get their hands on the ghost's ill-gotten gains. With each transaction, Chop solidified his position as a rising power broker in the underworld. When Vito finally caught wind of what was happening, he exploded with rage. He summoned Chop to a meeting, flanked once again by his hulking enforcers. But this time, Chop didn't come unarmed. Hidden beneath his coat was a pistol loaded with bullets meant for anyone foolish enough to cross him. "You think you can steal from me and get away with it?" Vito spat, his face red with fury. "I didn't steal anything," Chop countered coolly. "I saved your precious cocaine from disappearing forever. And now, thanks to me, it's generating profit faster than ever before." Vito's expression shifted from anger to disbelief. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Chop smirked, pulling out a wad of cash and tossing it onto the table. "That's just a taste of what I've made in the past week. Imagine what we could achieve working together." For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air. Then, unexpectedly, Vito laughed, a low, rumbling sound that sent chills down everyone's spines. "You've got balls, kid. Fine. We'll play it your way for now." But Chop knew better than to trust Vito's words. From that day forward, he operated cautiously, building alliances and fortifying his defenses. Within months, he had dismantled the Black Hand gang piece by piece, absorbing its remnants into his growing empire. By the time Vito realized what was happening, it was too late. Chop had become the new drug lord of the city, feared and respected in equal measure. And as he sat atop his throne of ill-gotten wealth, Chop couldn't help but smile. Sometimes, peril was just the push you needed to rise above.